There she will she. Okay, if this thing's switched on, then let's go. So, same as usual, we're gonna work from some decent reference. I do like this reference here of 2B. It's decently proportioned, so we're gonna go with that for the base, or for at least for the start. So yeah, we're gonna start separating everything out, getting everything in order, and go for a merge on some of the main parts like the thighs and the legs and everything like that, just so that we can easily mirror these with a decent sculpted base mesh. And we're going to go ahead and do that through the body and work on some of the proportions and get this thing lined up so that, you know, it feels a little bit more human. The artwork that I will be sculpting this from, the artwork this is based on, is a Supergirl painting. I'm probably going to butcher this name, but it's by a guy or somebody called Abraao Lucas, I think. I'll put it in the description for 100% sure, so you can go and check out the artist's work. Let's let this time-lapse play out, because for the moment, or like I said, all we're going to be doing is working on some of these proportions for the base, and I'll jump in if anything interesting comes up. So here's another good example of why I set up my base meshes the way I do. It's just a little bit easier to get some of the muscle proportions laid out and everything. So yeah, let's let this keep going. Again, all we're doing is merging some of the parts and working on the proportions for now. Okay, so moving on to the head sculpt. Again, we're going to keep symmetry on for as long as absolutely possible. This pose is actually quite a symmetrical pose, so I think there's a whole bunch of sculpting I do with symmetry on in this, but we're going to carry on with the head sculpt here. I'm going to try and get the head finished, or as close to finished as possible, before moving on, just so that I don't have to worry about it or try and do any sculpting once it's been posed, because then symmetry is a difficult thing to do after it's been moved, and it's doable, but I like to keep it as simple as possible for when I'm working. So I'm splitting the head here to ensure that it's symmetrical, and I'm going to mirror it back across. And outside of that, we're just going to be doing a lot of the same stuff we do in most of the sculpts. So working on proportions, getting the head looking right, probably get some ears going in a minute, and just get some of the landmarks of the face and body laid out. So yeah, let's let this keep playing out for now, and I'll jump in again when anything interesting happens. So just with the eyes here, I wanted to do a more stylistic type feel to this, so I made her eyes slightly bigger than they probably should be. It's just a stylistic choice. Love it or hate it, that's all it really is. So again, yeah, just adding some fat and adding the meat to where I need it on the face. going to sculpt in the eyes and the eyelids here, and just keep it moving forward and make sure that we've got a feminine feel to the head sculpt. So again, yes, we'll let this play out for a little while. I'll get the ears in, and we'll start working on the hair after this. I think it's the hair. So yeah, I'll jump in again when anything happens. Okay, so slowly working in parts of the pose. I try a couple of things out with the legs in a minute. Like to try and set them off so they're not symmetrical, but again, it's not how the reference footage looks. It's just not, I don't know, it didn't feel right for the pose. So I try a couple of things out with the legs here, but then I do go back to working with a symmetrical pose like the reference. We're going to get this arm and hand posed up, and then I think we're just going to join it and mirror it, but that does mean having to separate it and reorganize the hierarchy so that you can change the pose if you want to. I don't actually end up doing that, so it kind of worked out nicely. Here I made a bit of a mistake. I did a merge, I joined everything, and it merged the 2 feet at the bottom together, so I had to delete the leg and the feet and just bring in some extra parts from the original base mesh to get this thing moving again. It's at that point I decided to move on to working with the pose in symmetry again, and it just makes my life easier if any mistakes like this happen. So another issue I've got with the base mesh is that the groin area, the pubic bone in that area, they're a little bit, the slope in is a bit long, it's a bit smooth, so I bring that back down to make it feel like there's a pubic bone in there. I'll probably change that in the base mesh. And again, same here, we're going to start from the bottom, like I said before, because I'm just a bit more comfortable sculpting legs, and we're going to start working our way up through the body, merging it as we need, and getting this sculpt and this anatomy looking as clean as possible. So again, I'll jump in when anything interesting happens, but for now, we're just going to be sculpting the legs and feet. So again here, same, adding form and shape to the rib cage after the merge, because yeah, it's something I can't really change about the base mesh because it's hard to know where the weight's going to fall once you've posed it. But now that it's posed, we're going to start adding the muscle and the structure and the form, the underlying forms, so that no parts of it feel flat. So you can see here I'm working on bringing out the rib cage and lining up the muscle so that it's all where it's supposed to be and it doesn't look flat in any areas like it has done or like it does in the base mesh. So Same with the shoulders at the top there. I rolled the shoulders back and bring in some decent reference here so that I've got some idea of how the muscles might look if the shoulders are rolled up and back. So yeah, let's let this play out, and you can see where I go through it all and add the contact points of the skin and just work on the muscle and the anatomy of the back. And I'll move around the top of the body before moving on to the hands, and then yeah, move on to the hair. I did make her shoulders look kind of like muscly, but I didn't want to make her look masculine at the same time. So yeah, I went for some, found some footage, some reference images of like, I don't want to say bodybuilders, but athletic women, just to see what their shoulders look like when they're down and tensed up. And yeah, we ended up with this. I'm pretty pleased with it. So I'll let the sculpt play out for a little bit longer, and just jump in if anything comes up. So working on the hands here. The wrist was in a bit of an awkward position, so this does take a minute and I have to pull it around a little around the wrist because, I don't know, it just felt like there was no bone sort of connecting the wrist on the inside by the thumb. So I do work around this for a minute, but yeah, I get there. The hand looks good, I'm happy with it. Fingers have got like quite large gaps between them, which I'll work on as I sculpt. Yeah, here we go. And just, yeah, try and close up some of those gaps a little. But yeah, let's let this hand sculpt play out and you can see roughly where I take it, but I'm happy with it in the end. So yeah, let's let this play out and we'll see how it looks. So there you can see the fingers starting to look a bit skinny in some places. So yeah, I just chunk them out a little bit. I'm not going to see all the way through the side of the hand, so I just worry about chunking them out where you can see them. And it worked out pretty well. Carried on adding some of the fat and the tendons because the hands are obviously under a bit of stress. And then we do the final bits of work on the head and the neck area, and then I think we're going to move on to the hair. And this is the hair's going to be like a technique that I don't usually use. I like to use hair strands because it gives me more control. But because of how much hair she actually has, that was just way too much work. So I ended up sculpting a base mesh. I do try it out with the hair strands here, but I give up on it pretty quickly after realizing how much work's going to go into that. So I start sculpting a base mesh here. Once I'm happy with the overall shape of it, I'll add a little bit more detail and then start adding secondary hair strands just to give the hair another level of detail. So let's let this play out and I'll jump in if anything interesting happens. But, it's just a basic hair sculpt, and then adding flyaways and just extra hair. This stage of the sculpt is more about choosing the flow of the hair rather than, you know, and picking out any individual sections of the hair. So just wanted to make sure I had the large sections flowing in the direction I wanted, and then I'll start adding, like I said, adding the extras, and then start working the hair up a little bit with some detail. I'll go through a section on her right side as a proof of concept to myself. So I kind of work up one little section of the hair, add all of the flyaways, sculpt it up a little bit so that it looks a bit more, you know, believable. And once I'm happy with that, I'll then move on and just do that to the rest of the hair. So we'll see that play out now. so I believe it's around here that I'm happy with that, and I'm pleased with where it's headed. So I will start to move on to the rest of the hair. Again, it's a technique that I don't really use this technique very often. Like I said, I usually just do hair strands or some type of hair cards, but I wanted to try something out, and I wanted to prove to myself that conceptually it would look okay. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, working up one section of it to find out if it's what you're happy with, and then moving on to the rest. So that's what I did. I mean, it's one of the choices I made. I like to make sure, before wasting time doing a whole section of something and trying to split it out into equal tasks, I wanted to make sure it was going to work. So I go through this hair in particular, like I said, building it up in sections just to make sure I'm not losing anything or moving too far away from how the hair I want the final hair to look. So we're going to go ahead and finish the rest of this hair, add the rest of these flyaways and sculpt the rest of this hair detail in, and I'll jump back in once that is done. So yeah, enjoy the hair sculpt. So just there I was sorting out the hair into a group so that it was easily manageable and I didn't have to scroll through stacks and stacks of layers just to find the hair I want. So I organised it into a group in case I want to select the whole thing, and then what I'll do is I'll select the hair in the viewport and find out where it is in the layers if I need to do anything particular to it. So yeah, let's let this hair sculpt finish playing out, and we'll jump back in when we move on from here. Okay, so I'm very happy with how that hair came out. I just organised it into a group so that it was easily manageable, and we're going to move on to the clothing, to her superhero suit. So we're going to do the same as what I normally do, again depending on the type of clothing I'm trying to sculpt, and we're going to mask off an area and do an extraction. try and make it as clean as possible, and then we're going to sculpt up the clothes from there. So we're going to start with her top, then we're going to start with her underwear, then her boots, then her skirt. I'm reposing the hands here because I realise any remeshing I want to do is going to cause a merge between the upper thigh and her hands. So quick repose of the hands, then we're going to move on to extracting all of the parts that we need for her clothing before we move on to actually sculpting it. So yeah, this one's an extraction from the mesh, and then when I move on to the cape, it's sculpting a sphere so that one side of it is the shape and it's got the ripples and everything that I want in it, and then we'll extract from that outer edge of the sphere that we've sculpted. So let's let this play out, because like I said, all I'm doing is masking and extracting for the minute. So something I do here, I get the basic shape of it down from the sphere. I'm moving on to the shirt just to get this looking a bit neater, because it was distracting me. So moving the inside down a little so it feels like it's got an outer edge. And then I'll just move on from this pretty quickly. What I was talking about with the cape was I'll get the basic sculpt of it done from the sphere. I'll then do an extraction, and at some point I realise I'm just not 100% happy with it. So I sculpt up the mesh that I'm extracting now. I sculpt up that a little bit more, make it look a bit more like what I want, and then I'll do another extraction from that, and I'll move it towards the model like I normally do. But you'll see when we get to it. I'll sculpt this now a little bit more so that I'm a bit happier with it. But then I realised I can do a bit more, so I'll then, like I said, end up doing a second extraction from this cape that I'm sculpting on now. Yeah, so one of the reasons I actually extracted off of this again for the second time is because I realised I was messing up the mesh, like not beyond repair, but beyond what I really could be bothered to fight the mesh with. So, like I said, I just get some basic areas in that I'm happy with, like these long flowing edges here, and then I'll do a second extraction just because I'm not down for fighting the mesh at every turn. So as soon as I realised the mesh was just getting a bit, I don't want to say damaged, but just not quite what I'd be after, I move on from it and I extract a secondary mesh. So it's just something to think about. You know, there's nothing that says you can't do it like this, but I'm sure there are much more efficient ways. But you know, this is what I did. So yeah, there you go. It just gave me a much cleaner mesh to work with. You know, I had less repair work to do on it. So we're going to move on to the shoes now. Again, just following the reference as close as I can. Another great reason to have kept a symmetry for as long as possible here is, you know, I don't have to sculpt something and mirror it or sculpt it twice or anything. So, you know, I'm happy with how these shoes came out. So let's let these play out, and you can see some of the folds and creases that I sculpted into these shoes. So something to think about when you're extracting meshes is that if the resolution is kind of low on the original mesh that you extract from, it does give you a bit of a, you know, just messy edge. So the higher the detail that your mesh has, the more polys and the more points, the cleaner the extraction's going to be. So we're going to move on to the shirt now and just start sculpting in some of the creases from the tension points. So from the tip of the boob, under the arm, and just anywhere where the material might roll or crease or stretch from. So we'll let this play out again, because these are choices that you'll end up making just based on experience and where these kind of things might go. And by following the base mesh as close as possible without it becoming unrealistic, because a tight top would realistically stretch from over the top of the boob down to the side under the rib cage, but that's not in the actual reference. There are some creases in the reference, but not where they all should be, or not where there are predominantly creases, like on the back, for example. There's no reference for this, so you'll just learn this from experience and figuring out and sculpting clothing. You'll pick this sort of stuff up where they crease from and things. And it's not an exact science, so just take your best guess at it and look for some reference if you're not sure. But other than that, I'm quite happy with how this top comes out, so we'll let this play out and you can see how it goes. So across the elbows there, for example, where she straightened and bends her arm, so if she bends it, it would stretch the mesh, stretch the material over her elbow, and then when she goes to push it back, the material will be gripped on her upper arm and on her forearm, and it would cause wrinkling behind the elbow. So again, it's just stuff that comes with experience and knowing what sort of stuff to look for, as well as following the reference footage or the reference image as best you can. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the sculpt of the top. We're going to move on to the skirt after this, I believe, and we're going to do the same as we did with the cape. Bring in a sphere, start sculpting the sphere up, so we've got one surface, like I said, that feels like it should be the skirt, and we're going to extract from there and start working on that. So we'll let this play out and I'll jump in if anything interesting happens. Okay, so here we go with the base sculpt of the skirt. Just going to move some of the meshes out of the way using the high tool and start sculpting this mini skirt into place. I did put underwear on her because looking at the reference image, I'm not sure she's wearing any underwear, and I don't think YouTube allows that, so we're going to put underwear on her for this one. So one of the reasons I do thin clothing like this is because I don't want to have to fight the mesh. So if it's a really thin piece of mesh and you start moving it, you'll get instances where it might go through the back because there's a fall off on the actual amount of control or movement that you put on it. So if you grab it here on the right, for example, of the skirt, move it. It will only affect a certain area inside the circle. You can change these settings, but if you're working on a thin piece of mesh, then I really do think that you're just going to bump into a lot of issues where you're pushing the mesh through itself, and you'll end up with holes in it when you do a remesh. So that's one of the reasons I'll do it this way. and extract from a finished sculpt that's a solid piece. Okay, so there's the skirt. We're going to just clean up the edges, make sure it's all nice and tidy, do a little look around on it, make sure it's looking good, and just some quick tweaks. We're going to move the cape out of the way so there's no clipping. And again, yeah, we're just going to move on to the symbol on her clothing. I found I think this is the comic book version of her symbol, so I didn't want to use any of the movie stuff or anything like that. Wanted to keep it classic. So yeah, we're going to extract it from the top, and yeah, hopefully this looks pretty good. I'm pleased with it, and again, comic book accurate. So yeah, let's let this play out, and we'll see how it looks. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of cleanup on this because, like I said, the lower the resolution of what you're extracting from, the rougher the edge you're going to get, and I don't really have a device powerful enough to just put, you know, tens of millions of points in here, so I have to optimize as soon as I can, wherever I can, and I ended up with this. I thought it looked pretty good. We're going to paint some of the detail onto it in a little while, and paint the yellow underneath at the back. So yeah, moving on to the belt, just using the tube tool, we're going to pose it, move it around the edges, make sure that it's got no clipping that's too bad, and then we're going to add loops to the skirt for holding the belt. Not a lot really goes on with this. The most tricky part is when I have to add the belt holes that she's got her thumbs through, and make the skirt look like it's sort of undone at the front. But again, you know, it's just a bit of trial and error. I try something, it seems to work out okay, so then I just keep working off the top of that. But for now, we're going to add these belt buckle loops and let that play out. I'll jump back in when we get to the part of the clothing that she's holding on to. Okay, so here we go. I basically did what I would do with any piece of clothing that's a little bit awkward, and just brought in a sphere and started sculpting off of that, cutting away what I don't need. And when it gets to a certain point where I'm happy that it's, you know, feels kind of like the reference, I'll chop away the top of this and add another tube tool and make it like, you know, flat and square using the profile view on that. And then post it around her thumb and move on. I think I just mirror this and cut some of it away because it's a very symmetrical pose. But yeah, here we are. Basically, it gets to the part with the thumb. I'll remove the top of it and add a tube tool to make it feel like an actual loop that she's got her thumb through, rather than something I've just, you know, shoved her hand into that's not actually even got a hole in it. So yeah, we'll do an extraction here. And then get the tube tool on there so that I can actually close the loop. So here we go, adding the actual belt buckle loop with the tube tool there. I'm going to cut away what's left on the inside of the skirt so that it actually feels like it's pulling down from her waist and around her groin area. But I think I'll mirror this across first and maybe cut some of it out of the way. Yeah, there we go. And once this is all in place, I'll cut some of the skirt away on the middle. There we go, there, and do a merge, and then we'll call that skirt done. I'm pretty happy with that. A bit of tidy up on some of the other meshes, and then yeah, we'll move forward. I'm going to add the thumb nails and just do a little bit of a sculpt around these thumbs, because these are parts of the hand we can see. We never really see under the hand, so I don't bother sculpting any of the other nails or anything like that. So yeah, let's do some final tweaks on the face, add a little bit of an eyebrow sculpt, pop these eyelashes in, and then start working on painting, I believe. Maybe do a little tweak on the eyeball pose, but yeah, we'll be on to the painting in a little while. Oh, we'll do a manual decimate, as I call it, as well. So yeah, basically dyno topology on, lower the actual strength of the smooth brush, set the dyno topology to whatever resolution you want, so that it's lower than what you're working on, and then just gently rub over the entire model to kind of do a manual decimate. So right, moving on to the skin. Base layer of skin, top layer of skin, like usual. And then we'll add the different colours underneath, the reds, the yellows and the blues. We can start with the reds on the cheeks. Now there's only a certain amount of her flesh that's on show, so we don't actually have to paint the entire thing, just what we can see. So adding red to anywhere that I want to put warmth, or anywhere where there might be blood vessels close to the surface. And then we'll move on to adding the blue. Okay, so adding the blues for a little bit of depth. Let's put it all around her jaw and add it into any of the creases or anywhere on your body where you can see veins. When I actually get to sculpting these, to 3D printing and painting these, I've seen a technique I want to try out where they paint some of the larger veins onto the underneath the top layer of the skin. And I really want to give that a try, because I think that the finished result looks amazing. So I'm really excited to get to printing and painting some of these sculpts, because I just want to try some of these techniques out. So yeah, adding the yellow for the last parts, smoothing out any areas, or re-adding mesh to where I've made any mistakes, and we're going to paint these eyebrows in. Bit of eyeliner here again, just, you know, work it up in layers, guys. I think I had a bit of eye makeup to the inside, and tried to tone it down as much as possible, because I don't want it to look like she's got bruised eyes, but I want it to look like she's got some depth to her eyes. Pretty happy with that skin, so we're going to move on to everything else now. We're going to add all of the base layers, all the base colours, and on some of her clothing, I'm going to add like a dirt pass, just to make it feel a bit more lived in. I do struggle with the blue here and what blue to choose, but once I settle on that, like I said, we'll add some add a dirt pass to it, so that it feels like a used suit rather than a brand new suit. I think one of the areas where you can see the wear and tear on the suit the best is on the gold trim. So once I get down to it, you'll see me add this to the boots and the collar. The boots and the cuffs, but everything else is just a standard dirt pass once I'm happy with the colour of the suit. So the blue I'm not keeping. I do change that blue for the final version of this, but you know, I just wanted to move on and not get bogged down in one thing. So yeah, let's let this paint job play out, and you can see some of the choices I made and how it all goes. So here we go, that's a little bit closer to the final blue that I end up choosing. I do change her underwear from red to white, just to add a little bit of a pop in the middle, and just to break it up a little bit, because there's only a few colours in this sculpt, and I just wanted to break it up and add a little bit of pop to it, just to make it feel a bit, I don't know, it just felt like very, you know, yellow, red and blue were the only colours that we're really seeing. So I toy with some different colours here, but ultimately go with white underwear, mostly just to break up the sculpt. So again, keeping everything on separate layers makes it easy to manage, so I can change the depth of something without worrying about anything else. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I think, so we're just moving on to lighting now, so I'm happy with the paint job at least. So let's move on to lighting this guy. We'll add a base and we'll go ahead and add a 3-point light setup to it. You know, main light, fill light to bring some light back into the shadows. This one's a rim light, and then finally the fill light. So the rim light's there just to add a bright edge to pop her off the background. And yeah, you can Google that. It's a basic 3-point light setup. So yeah, final result I'm happy with. I ended up okay, so full disclosure, off camera, once I'd finished the recording, I looked at it again, wasn't happy with how pale she looked, so I actually did some little tweaks to the skin tones off of camera just to make her look a little bit more tan. But yeah, final result I'm happy with. This is a good sculpt. I enjoyed this. I think this one would work well as a 3D print, so I'm really excited for that in the future. And yeah, please enjoy. I hope you guys liked the content. You know, if you did, feel free to give me a like and a subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram now, so there's a link in my YouTube for that. And yeah, with all that being said, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.